Welcome back to my American College Student Reading Journal, Part 2. For this section, I will again be discussing Levine and Dean's Generation on a Tightrope, specifically Chapter 8 this time, which is the conclusion to the author's study. I'm normally not critical of the readings that we've had throughout the semester, but this chapter I found to be full of some contradictions as well as overgeneralizations about the millennial generation. And as a member of this group, I found some of these comments to be a bit insulting and even unwarranted. The opening paragraph forces the reader to do what I called look forward into history. At least that's what I wrote off to the side in my book. And what I meant by this was the authors are comparing the current generation of college students to those born in the 1840s at the beginning of a transportation revolution. And they noted that just as later generations after the 1840s were vastly influenced by railways, steamboats, and industry in America, so too, they claim, will generations after the millennials be affected by a world of global, digital, and information economy. So, up to this point in the chapter, I really had no problem with the arguments Levine and Dean were trying to make. I understood the parallels they were trying to draw between the Industrial Revolution and the major advances in technology that are associated with the millennial generation. But they started to lose me when they began making harsh generalizations about millennials and called them such things as unprepared, self-absorbed, and incapable of embracing the changes that will be associated with this new global and technological world. A quote pulled directly out of this portion of the chapter, Levine and Dean noted that today's college students will live in an era of economic and social change. They went on to say, these students are not prepared for this world. They lack the skills, much of the knowledge, and a good deal of the perspective it will require. Levine and Dean then go on to make some generalizations about what skills and characteristics, generally speaking, that these students have. They say that millennials are weak in face-to-face social skills and that they're tribal in their relationships. While I can understand the angle the authors are taking by making these generalizations, I think they're forgetting the reasons why this phenomena or these characteristics are appearing in this generation of students. They're weak in face-to-face social relationships because face-to-face interactions arguably are becoming less important as technology and internet become main facets of communication between people, especially in this age group. Next, I was taken aback by some of the contradictions that I found in the claims that Levine and Dean were making. First, they called millennials immature, needy, timid, and protected. But just a few lines later, they called them pragmatic, career-oriented, and determined to do well. Although maybe not direct opposites, I find these two comparisons to be quite contradictory to each other, and I find, personally, I believe being career-oriented and pragmatic are signs of being mature, and quite certainly not the other way around. Next, Levine and Dean say that students are confusing the quantity of their work with the quality of the products they produce. To this I say, our schools are reinforcing these habits. Higher education is too often associated with students attending crowded lecture halls and being forced to memorize large quantities of information that can simply be regurgitated on exams and then forgotten the next day. If educators such as Levine and Dean are worried about students forgoing quality for quantity, then they themselves need to look in the mirror and decide how to better educate students and enforce this idea of quality themselves. In the next statement from Levine and Dean, they call students global talkers but local actors. Again, I think we, and I'm going to use we as in the millennial generation because I consider myself a part of this group, we are simply the product of the times. We are global thinkers because we have constant access to the global network of online information and resources, yet we're confined to our local lives because of the state of our economy. Oftentimes we don't have the financial capabilities to travel to far-off places around the world and experience different cultures firsthand. We must increasingly attend college in our own communities, as we see enrollment skyrocketing at community colleges, and we rely on our basic relationships in our own communities as well, including our parents and family members, not just for social support, but for financial well-being. Therefore, I find it useful to take one of the quotes from Levine and Dean and to dissect it and put it in my own meaning. They say, quote, "They talk internationally," and to that I say, because of the internet. "But their focus is local." To that I say, because of the economy. And finally, their knowledge of the world is poor in an age of globalization. And to that I say, because the media is sending millennials skewed and biased perceptions of domestic and global affairs. Who are millennials to believe and rely on to help shape their impression of the world? I think it's the predecessors and generations of past that are much to blame for the problems facing millennials. It is hypocritical to claim that millennials are lacking in decorum related to technology, when later in the same chapter, Levine and Dean cite teachers who admit, quote, "Millennials know more about technology than I will ever know." Dean and Levine say, colleges need to prepare a generation of students who are not simply technology users, but who are literate in the use of technology, information, and media. How is this possible, is what I say. Since millennials are digital natives, how can they be taught about technology by those who grew up in a time without technology? Using the same argument that Levine and Dean used to begin the chapter, their example about the Industrial Revolution, that would be like saying a generation of industrial natives could be taught about factory work by those who lived in a time of rural agrarian life. These types of generalizations and opinions that are not supported by the facts of their study continue to surface throughout the latter portion of Chapter 8. Levine and Dean later make an argument that diversity needs to be enhanced in higher education, and that the best way to make this happen is to reduce merit-based scholarship and to increase need-based aid. While I completely understand the argument they're making here, I didn't realize this book was supposed to be persuasive. The entire time I had the perception that the book was going to be laying out the details and facts of their study. Instead, they're laying out their opinions. There is also evidence that shows that a congruent environment is effective in promoting student success and retention, and that students thrive in environments where they're surrounded by students who have much of the same physical and ethnic traits as they have. So, to counter Levine and Dean's argument, why should we abandon the act of rewarding students for their academic achievements prior to college and simply focus on need-based scholarships? I think that's a hasty generalization or an argument that kind of goes against the rest of the book, which uses facts instead of opinions. Lastly, I disagreed strongly with yet another comment made by Levine and Dean when they were discussing double majoring, the phenomenon of double majoring that is common with millennials. They say students are double majoring to gain an edge in the market. They then say they don't need to do this. A minor in a second field will serve them just as well. And to that, I couldn't disagree more. We live in a time of increased credentialization, where highly qualified individuals are kept out of jobs because they lack the proper credentials or degrees. As having a minor myself as an undergrad, I don't see the value in minors. I don't think that employers are looking for minors to be paired with certain degrees. I don't think they hold that much weight, and in fact, they don't even show up on most people's physical diplomas. So to think minors will suffice and be just as valuable as another major, I think that's highly naive to say. So with all of these statements made by Levine and Dean in Chapter 8, there was really one section of the chapter that particularly opened my eyes, and that was when the authors spoke of their conversations with several small organizations who admitted that they avoid hiring millennials or recent graduates because these students lack basic skills and carry baggage in the workplace. To that, I think that employers share much of the blame in these situations as well. Part of it could be considered laziness, that they're not prepared to properly train these individuals, and instead of trying to mend the differences between the generational gap, they simply dismiss these students, misunderstanding their potential. And next to this section of the book, I wrote in bold letters, "Fine, get left behind then." And what I mean by this is, for all the old school employers and hiring managers that are passing on millennial students and recent college graduates, your businesses are going to get left behind as these younger students that are more inept with social media and emerging technology form their own businesses, and entrepreneurs create new ideas that surpass the capabilities of your old businesses. So to conclude the chapter, I just had to say I disagree with the statements Levine and Dean make, especially when they say, "We know who today's college students are, we know the challenges they will face, and we know the skills, knowledge, and attitudes that this will require." In fact, Levine and Dean, I don't necessarily think you know as much about this generation as you believe. The only time I think they completely got it right in the chapter is when they noted that higher education faces a significant challenge because it may be even less prepared for the future than the students themselves. So instead of discrediting the millennial generation and overgeneralizing some of their weaknesses, which is, although maybe unintended, the way I felt this chapter was presented, I think students in this generation need to be more praised for the skills that they do have, and people need to realize that a lot of the characteristics associated with this generation are merely a product of the times, and a lot of their personality traits have developed in accordance with emerging global society.